Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the program Off the Shelf, sponsored by Sisters in Crime Atlanta chapter and hosted by our own Dawn Gepfer. I'm Lance Barron, the resigning 2024 president of the chapter. We're looking for replacements. So if you're ready to volunteer, just raise your hand or send me an email. We are very happy to have Sally Handley with us this morning. She transitioned from being just an avid reader to being a writer and is now the author of the Holly and Ivy classic cozy mystery series. And she's also written a standalone suspense novel, Stop the Threat. She writes a series on the Kindle Vella program called The Adventures of Trixie, written from the viewpoint of her faithful companion. She's been a member of Sisters in Crime and is the former president of the Upstate, South Carolina chapter. She hosts a monthly online mystery book club and a Meet the Author series on her YouTube channel. Sally majored in English and graduated from Douglas College at Rutgers University and started teaching in public school. From there, she transitioned into business and worked as a professional services marketer for 30 years. She retired and returned to teaching as an adjunct professor of English and fully retired in 2015. She now lives in Mauldin, South Carolina, which is just outside Greenville, and she devotes her time to teaching, writing, and gardening. And so today, Dawn is going to talk to Sally about her path to writing and also about her most recent book in the series, Bogus Blooms, and her standalone, Stop the Threat. And we're all glad to have you here, Sally. Dawn, take it away.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on a beautiful Saturday here in Atlanta. And from what I understand from chatting with Sally before we started the program, it's beautiful in South Carolina as well. It's great, but although we were talking about the fact that there might still be some cold weather coming, which, hey, it is what it is. But Sally, thank you so much for agreeing to spend a Saturday morning with us. And we're excited to get to know you a little bit better. Before we get started, I do like to ask the audience to please participate. Feel free to chime in and ask a question, or if you are not comfortable doing so, you can use the chat and one of the Sisters in Crime chapter members will ask the question for you. Or I do try to keep an eye on it and I'll try to bring it up as well. But please participate in this conversation with Sally. So let's go ahead and get started. And Lance shared quite a bit about your background, but I'd like to know a little bit more about you. So why don't you share who Sally Handley is prior to becoming an author?
Well, first, let me say I'm delighted to be with you this morning. I feel very honored to be invited to join you in Off the Shelf. So I was born in 1951, the dead center of the baby boom, and I'm a true blue baby boomer. I was born in Kingston, Pennsylvania, but was raised in the sleepy little town of Pringle, Pennsylvania, which few people have ever even heard of. It's a town 1 mile square, and the commercial building consisted of my Aunt Sarah's grocery store and a cemetery. That's all that was, the rest was all little houses. It was a small town on a hill in Pennsylvania. And as with many authors, I began reading voraciously as a child. I just loved to read. I remember going to the library with a friend of mine, and we would get 4 books. That's all you were allowed to get out. But we had, and I know this will sound cliche, but we really did have to walk a mile to get to the library. And we would go down in the summertime and we would get 4 books. 4 days later, we went back, we had read a book a day, and then, came back home and we had to go back to the library and get some more. And of course, I took these off of my shelf. I don't know if you can see these vintage books, but these are the ones that kind of got me involved in mysteries. Cherry Ames, everybody doesn't know her, but she was a nurse, and I loved these books. And of course, Nancy Drew, we all know Nancy Drew. So, those were what got me into enjoying mysteries. But of course, then, we moved to New Jersey when I was 13 years old. So I started high school in Garfield, New Jersey. And then I was an English major at Douglas College, which is also in New Jersey. And all I ever wanted to be was an English teacher, because to me, literature and writing was what it was all about. I did write a little bit when I was small. I'd start to write stories. I'd start to write little poems. And I'm not quite sure why I stopped, but I still always was the reader. So after college, I got a teaching job in the public school system. I taught language arts, they called it then.
Yes.
The department was language arts, and I taught 7th and 8th graders for 6 years. And that was really about all I could do. In that time, one of the best experiences of my life was going 3 summers to England to get my master's degree. And I got that from Roxton College, which was a campus of Fairleigh Dickinson University. Fairleigh Dickinson University is a private university in New Jersey. And the daughter of one of the trustees went over to England and found this abbey in a small village. It had thatched roofs, little duck pond, 2 pubs. She found this abbey that had fallen into disrepair. Nobody was living in it. Nobody was doing anything with it. And Fairleigh Dickinson bought it and turned it into a campus, a full-time campus. And during the school year, they offered courses in government and literature, English literature. And in the summer, they offered a master's degree program. And oh my God, it was like being in heaven, right? It was an English major's dream. Roxton is halfway between Stratford and Oxford. And we would study the Shakespearean plays that they were performing at the Shakespeare Theater in Stratford. And then we would have sometimes the actors come. We also were studying on the Oxford method, where we had lecturers, famous lecturers from all over England come and speak to us. And then we had tutorials in the afternoons with the professors from the college. So it was and we were living in an abbey. It was, as you could tell, it was one of my favorite memories of all time. So after the 6 years of teaching and getting this master's degree, and still, teaching 7th and 8th graders was not cutting it for me. But I lived in northern New Jersey, which was a train ride away from Manhattan. I was 10 miles from Manhattan. So I decided I was going to go into business, which I did. And I got to work as an administrative assistant for an engineering firm, of all things, a structural engineering firm. I didn't know at all what structural engineers were when I got the job, but I was basically typing. Word processing was new, and I had mastered it. So I could type 90 words a minute. Okay, so I was really pretty good at this. But after I was there just a few months, the marketing person quit. And they said, "Sally, we think you'd be good for marketing." And the reason was because I could write. So I wrote proposals, I wrote press releases, I wrote staff biographies. There's a lot of writing involved in marketing. And, growing up at my age, basically, you know, women had the choice of being either a nurse or a teacher. You didn't have as many role models in different professions as you do today. So, you know, who knew that the writing would be a skill that would be required in some other profession, but it was great. And I did that for 30 years. Eventually I had my own consulting practice. But yeah, I really enjoyed when I was working for myself, because then I was also, the interesting thing is I started doing webinars to teach marketers how to market professional services, because most of the marketing that was being taught on the college level was to sell products.
Yep.
But when you're selling professional services like architecture and engineering, it's a whole different practice.
Yeah.
So, you know, after 20 years, I was pretty good at this. And I was one of the most experienced people in Manhattan doing this. And I was president of my marketing association, and I knew everybody, and life was really good for me, you know? So I started, I could be a consultant. I was qualified to be a consultant and go into small firms and help them set up their marketing departments. But I also started teaching webinars. And somebody asked me, could you create a writing class? And I said, yeah, of course I could do that. So once I had done that, I realized I enjoyed it so much that I thought I need to look for other opportunities to teach writing. So I went to my local community college, and I got they hired me to teach as an adjunct professor. Of course, you're teaching English composition, right? Expository writing. But I loved it. I taught one class the first semester that they hired me, and then that was it. Then, you know what? I didn't want to do the marketing anymore. I didn't want to go to all the functions I had to go to and keep up with all the things that I needed to keep up with. And so I ended up like writing or teaching at two different colleges in northern New Jersey. And then, I don't know, I got the idea to start writing a mystery. Since mysteries were what I love to read, I thought, and I don't know how many of you have watched Rosemary and Thyme, but I adored that series. In fact, I own the CDs and I watch them over and over again, right? Because I love those two characters. And they are gardeners, right? And their gardening knowledge helps them solve crimes. So, believe it or not, one of the last marketing conferences I went to was up in Massachusetts. And my sister and I decided to go up early, and we went to Cape Cod first. And we're sitting in the beautiful gardens of the Daniel Webster Inn, which was also beautiful, right? And I said to my sister, you know, this reminds me of Rosemary and Thyme, and why can't there be an American version of Rosemary and Thyme? And why can't it be two sisters who garden?
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I got the idea, and I started to write this story, okay? Now, my sister and I are both gardeners. We're avid gardeners. And we look very much alike. We're frequently asked if we're twins. We're 3 years apart, so I'm older, and I'm very flattered whenever that question's asked us. But I thought, oh, that's a great element to add to the story for mistaken identity and so on. So I thought I think this could be good. So as soon as you start to write, you realize you don't know how to do this. You know, yeah, I was a writing teacher, but expository writing and creative writing are like night and day. And so I discovered the International Women's Writers Guild in New York, and they were having a conference at Drew College in New Jersey. So I was able to sign up for that without even I could drive there every day. And then I met a writer who was conducting a class. I took her class. Then I didn't even know what a cozy mystery was, but realized quickly that that's what I was writing when somebody said something about cozy. And then somebody said, you must go to Malice Domestic. So living in New Jersey, driving down to Bethesda was a cinch. I went to that first conference by myself, and I remember going to the Sisters in Crime table. And I said, oh, this sounds like such an interesting organization. And yeah, there were chapters in New Jersey. And they said, so are you a writer? I said, well, I had this idea for a book. They go, you're a writer. Okay, you're a writer. And so I thought, absolutely, I had to join. But then it was time for me to retire. And I came to South Carolina and I joined Sisters in Crime here. And that kind of brings me up to I've now got 6 books in my series. I've got the standalone unit and I'm working on something new now. So that's me through the ages up to my writing journey.
So there's a couple of things that I picked up on while you were taking us down that journey. And so if we could just kind of go back in time a little bit. So Pringle, Pennsylvania, you are correct. I am unfamiliar with it. And it's a very small place. There's limited business, mainly residential. So what is the closest town? Like what the people?
Wilkes-Barre. Wilkes-Barre.
Okay, and so do people like commute to Wilkes-Barre and go to work and then come home?
Yes. Well, there's a town in between Pringle. At the bottom of the hill was Kingston, Pennsylvania. So there were factories and different types of employment there. And then Wilkes-Barre was, of course, town. My mother would take us to town at Christmas to get, new clothes and new shoes and buy our Christmas presents. So that's the nearest big city.
I think I'm trying to recall. We have family in Hazleton.
Oh yeah, very close.
Okay, and
Very close.
I flew out of Wilkes-Barre. There's
Yes.
an airport. Yeah.
Avoca. Yeah.
It was about an hour and a half, 2-hour drive. Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So I have a sense of.
Northeastern Pennsylvania.
Yeah. Okay. So, and then, when you decided to major in English, what was your plan? Did you have a plan at that time?
I always wanted to be an English teacher. Once I decided to be an English major, I just wanted to be an English teacher. I thought I thought there was nothing grander than to be, teaching kids how to read, talking about literature, talking about stories, and writing.
So, as an English major, please forgive me if I need to clear my throat. Something just got in there. Anyway, as an English major, and thinking about the literature side, is it American literature you study as well as English, or is it one or the other?
We had a very broad based set of requirements at Douglas College, and it was excellent because there were 3 core courses that you had to take, and that was English literature from Beowulf up to the present. Okay, and then there were 2 American Lit courses that you had to take. So 5 of your classes were required. It still shocks me that Shakespeare was not required, but of course I took the one Shakespeare course, which was excellent. I can still remember Professor Falk, and she just opened my eyes to, the imagery and the brilliance, the sheer brilliance of Shakespeare. Because I had an excellent English teacher, Mrs. Mooney, when I was a senior in Garfield High School, and she had us read 4 Shakespearean plays in our high school English class, and it was great. But it was at that stage you're more focused on the story, the plot. Okay, but my English professor in college, Doris Falk, was brought out the imagery that's just so consistent throughout the entire an entire play, and I just loved it. So then to go to Roxton and and see the plays performed by actors for whom Shakespearean English was the vernacular, so that you know, you were understanding it so much. It was like you could understand what they were saying because they got every intonation. They were wonderful. It was an amazing experience.
Absolutely. It sounds fascinating. Is that program still in place?
Unfortunately, the master's degree is not. I suppose it just becomes too expensive for people. Although teachers make way better money than we did back then. But you know, I was young and I lived at home for a while before I finally got my own apartment with a roommate. But that enabled me to have the money to go and spend the summers there, because it would be 2 8-week sessions. It was a really amazing experience. But yeah, unfortunately, they just don't get enough people to attend, and they're full time during the school year, but not the summers. They kind of do special programs, but not the master's program.
And so, well, it's good to know though that the Abbey is still acting as a school, and it's being put to good use, and it's creating a very atmospheric
Oh, totally.
environment, an inspiring environment. It's very interesting. And also, you had mentioned that you went for 3 summers.
Yes.
Did it take the 3 summers to get the master's, or did you
Yeah.
do an extra curriculum?
It took 3 summers to do the full program. And ironically, one of the reasons I took this program, I can still remember opening the National Education Association magazine and saw the ad and saw the Abbey picture, right? And then I read the requirements for the program, and they did not require a thesis. You had to take, yeah, you had to take a
Old.
exam. Right now, I know other people prefer to write papers than to take exams, but I'm an exam taker. I don't panic. I'm very calm, and I always preferred, because to me, you sit down, you're there for a couple of hours, you just write your heart out, and you're done. So that was the program for me.
And you got to have this amazing experience that you treasure. So absolutely, that was the program for you. If you had to write a thesis, what would you have written a thesis on? Or what, if you had to write one today, what would you write a thesis on?
Oh, if I had to write one today, I would probably write it on Celtic mythology and Druidism. But if you know, because that's kind of what I'm interested in at the moment. But back then, definitely it would have been a theme in Shakespeare. It would have been you know, the use of imagery, a certain kind of image, like the history plays, which I'd never read until then, like Richard III. He's such a perfect villain. I have a feeling I would have done something with Richard III.
So we had another teacher last year on Off the Shelf, and I had asked him, he's an English teacher, and I was like, well, as an English teacher and a mystery writer, and maybe I didn't phrase it quite the correct way, what recommended reading do you have? Thinking we were going to continue the conversation about like mystery writing, and he would say, oh, you know, and mention, you know, Dennis Lehane or somebody, and he said Shakespeare. I was like, oh, no, you know, like, no, I don't want to go academic here.
Yes.
But anyway, I loved, as I was reading about you and getting to, you know, getting some information for this conversation, that there was that Shakespearean tie as well,
Yeah.
that you seem to have. And I will say this, after that conversation, I did buy the collected works of William Shakespeare, which I have not cracked open yet, but I did buy it to maybe get myself a little bit more familiar with him, because as you said, it wasn't required reading.
No.
At least not here, maybe in
Still
the
not.
US.
It's still
Yeah.
not.
So, but it should be. I
It's
do think
good.
because it comes up constantly, especially when you talk about great literature. So Shakespeare does come up often. So let's, what I do have a question about your marketing career as well. And I love your story. I love how this was a very organic, it was an opportunity that knocked and you took it. Was there any kind of learning curve for you in adapting your writing from a professional English teacher perspective to more business writing? Was there
Yeah,
something?
there absolutely was. And I still remember my boss, Joe Zuliani, saying to me, when you describe something, so for example, if you're doing it in creative writing, you maybe want to use superlatives to describe something. And he says, no, in business writing, you want to describe, for example, a building project in such a way that the reader says, wow, not you. And that was, yes, it definitely required you to cut out anything that, uh, especially when you're submitting for publication, you, if you submitted something and you actually saw that it was accepted in a publication, you would see that certain adjectives would be scratched out because you were putting your spin on this. So yeah, there's a real subtlety to business writing, that you have to get the reader to say, wow, not you saying, wow, look at what we did. So it was, yeah, there was definitely a learning curve.
And then when you were asked to teach writing, was that business writing or was it creative writing that
No, that was business writing.
okay.
That was because, you got to understand, over the years, writing skills have just become degraded.
Mm-hmm.
Basic, people are coming out of school and they really cannot write at all. And so I was teaching people how to write proposals, how to write press releases, how to write staff resumes, and so forth. So that I was teaching business writing then.
Would that be described in another way as technical writing?
Yeah, especially if you're working for engineers, there might be technical writing. And it was great because I found, well, I loved working with structural engineers. Structural engineers are Boy Scouts, they're honorable, they always do the right thing, they're smart, but they're very, they would like choke before they put a praiseworthy adjective into what they were writing. So I loved working with them because I was able to pull out of them the information that I needed to write for them. So it was kind of, I was a good match for this profession because it involved working with people who were very different from me and who had a very different background from me, a very different skill set from me. But I had the skills that they didn't need. I would laugh sometimes. People would say, oh, marketers don't get enough respect in this industry, and you should get a technical degree. And I thought, I don't need the technical degree. The technical people have that. They
Yeah.
don't have what I have.
Yeah.
And that's what I would try to teach marketers also. It's like, value what you bring to the table. You have something that they don't. And if you approached it with that viewpoint, you really could be very successful at it.
Yeah, I really love, like, you are inspiring, not just as a writer, but also this business background and just the way you approached that opportunity in your career. It's very, very inspiring. So kudos.
Thank you. Thank you.
So now you've had a great career. It did well for you, as you said, and you decided to retire, and you had this spark of an idea for a a book, and Holly and Ivy were created. So transitioning from 30 years of business, technical, practical writing, now going back into the creative realm, was there another transition you had to work yourself through?
Totally, totally. And that's why I took the writing class. And right now I'm embarrassed to admit that I can't think of the author's name, because it would be good. Well, she doesn't offer the class anymore. But we would meet on a Saturday morning, and you could submit like, I don't know how many 1,000 words of what you were writing, and then everybody would critique it, and she would as well. And yeah, all of a sudden now I'm supposed to be using adjectives. You know, I'm supposed to be building in, and to this day, I admit I am not a good descriptive writer. I have to work very hard at it, but dialogue, that's what I'm good at. And I still, so I'm still a work in progress when it comes to writing descriptively. But at least I think I've gotten better at it than I used to be. But I lean towards the dialogue to reveal character and whatnot, as opposed to description. So yeah, that it was definitely all of a sudden that spare writing that you did as a business writer had to be changed to something totally different.
Mhm. A new mindset
Yeah.
when it came to writing. So you did you it sounds like you came up with the idea while you were still working, because you
Yes.
mentioned you were with your sister in Cape Cod and
Yes.
you were there for a conference. So how long did it take from that point of this spark of an idea to actually start
Well,
start developing the character right away and kind of put it on hold until you had the time?
I started writing it. I did start writing it. It would have been like 2011, about when I closed my business and was just teaching then at that point. But you can imagine, when you're teaching English composition, you don't have a whole lot of time to read.
Right.
Uh,
That's what you're reading,
so
are those
yeah,
compositions.
exactly. You're reading compositions and you're planning classes, but like towards the end, I was in a comfortable enough position to take the summers off. And so then during the summer, I developed it a little bit more. Then I fully retired and moved to South Carolina in 2014. And I sat down next to a woman named Judy Bush, who was from Connecticut, and we struck it off as friends. She was new to moving down here as well. And she had been part of a critique group that she said, "Oh God, like they just didn't understand the cozy mystery." She said, the critiques that they would give me, it would, it seemed to me like they didn't understand what I was writing. I said, "Well, why don't we start our own critique group?" Which we did. And we still to this day have a critique group. We've got 2 additional members. And that's when I started. And then, of course, I joined Sisters in Crime. And I took one of their classes also. So I was fully in, I was fully in the process now, and I was able to devote my time to it. So I think the first book probably got published at the end of like 2015. So it was a couple of years. It was several
Mhm.
years it took me to, because the first draft was just pathetic. Like I realized it was like 98 pages long, and I had no suspects, and I thought all I did was tell a story. I didn't do this right. So then I went back and I caught on to how to do this, and working with a critique group was an amazingly beneficial experience, which I recommend to everyone.
Is your critique group, are they also in the mystery genre, or is
Yeah.
it Okay.
They're all in the mystery genre, and actually we're now kind of all doing slightly different stuff from where we started, but we're a very cohesive group. And you know, when you're working with criticizing somebody's work, essentially, no matter how nicely you try to say it, you are criticizing their work. You're giving it a critical view. And it's extremely important for the people in a critique group to trust one another. You know, you have to trust that the comments are coming from a place of love and not like, I don't like you, and so anything you write, I'm gonna tell you what's wrong with it. No, we're very open, but we're very open to receiving, and we're also mature enough to know, like, some things that I'm not going to agree with, and I can keep what I don't have to do everything that a critique partner tells me. So we just are we work very well together, and I'm very grateful for them.
So now let's talk about getting that first book published. What was that experience like for you?
Okay, I am, as we say, independently published. Okay, and I'll tell you why. I'm a Taurus, and we are known for being stubborn. Okay.
You are, yes.
Yeah. Well, I took this class on how to do your query letter and all the pieces that you need and how to be prepared for that, and I started sending out queries after I finished the first book. And you get these constant, this isn't what we're looking for, not at this time, thank you very much. And I had the idea for book 2 and had started to write book 2. And I would get these email replies, and then I would find all kinds of excuses not to sit down and write. I just, not today, maybe another day. And then all of a sudden I realized I'm letting this, as sturdy as an ego as I have, I am allowing this to keep me from writing. And that doesn't make any sense to me. And so self-publishing had been pretty well established at that point in time. It's not like it was anything new. And because I had a background in business and working with computers, I was unafraid to try to do that. So that's what I did. I went into KDP Amazon. I just followed the process. It was daunting at first, but I mastered it. I got the book up, I got it out. And again, because I had a background in marketing, I knew what I had to do. I had to get the word out. I had to use my email address list to to let people know about it. I had to go. Well, also, I was doing public speaking and webinars. So I would speak to garden clubs. I spoke at my local senior center. I sold the most books I ever sold at my senior center when I introduced the book. So I did all the things that you need to do. I still don't do, like, everybody publishes these launch checklists, and it's like I look at it and go, no, I'm not going to do all that. And so I continue to do, and now I also use Amazon ads. And I find that they are, I get a lot of people reading my books on Kindle Unlimited. And
Yeah.
it's great because, you can almost see the thread. Like, you'll see book 1 will sell. And then all of a sudden, book 2, 3, 4, they go, cozy mystery readers love series. And if they like your characters, they want to stick with them and go right through the whole series with you. So that's my publishing. I even tried, with Stop the Threat, the other book, that the suspense novel. Again, I tried to query that. The same thing happened. I thought, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to continue the self-publishing journey.
So KDP is Kindle Direct Publishing. Publishing, okay. And I think that's of interest to our audience of both readers and writers. So thank you for sharing that with us. I will tell you that's not something I was familiar with. So I like hearing about it. And as a reader, it's just another platform for me to find
Right,
more books to read.
right.
So when you created Holly and Ivy, yes, you had some inspiration from an English television program. Other than setting, other than England versus, the United States, were there any other transitions that your characters or any other changes in creating your series, so that it was different from Rosemary and
Well,
Thyme?
they're very American, and they're Holly, of course, has a romantic interest that um this is funny. We were talking about this the other day. And I'm going to be speaking at Malice Domestic on a panel called Love and Murder Rom Cozies, right? And I love that because I always enjoy the romantic angle in cozy mysteries that I read. But one of the things that always frustrates me are the character who's got like three love interests at the same time, and she can't make up her mind which one she wants. Like, that is so foreign an experience in my lifetime that I can't follow that. But the one where, like, it takes them 4 books to finally get together. So my love angle develops much more quickly, and it's permanent. But other than that, no, I don't. I think pretty much it's the same thing. We have basically either plants that are poisonous or plants factor in one way or another. And this last book, the Mystery of the Bogus Blooms, I have students who have done an experiment for a science fair on genetically modified organisms. And
Throwing some science in there, huh?
there was some science in it. It was very funny. When I started to write this book, I realized very early on that an idea I had about GMOs was completely wrong. And I thought, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? I have got to do research on this topic. I can't just start writing on this. So I remembered that this young woman who lived across the street from me and who did some administrative work for me when I was a marketing consultant had become a biology teacher. So I emailed her and I said, Lauren, I'm writing this book and this is the idea. And do you think you can help me? Oh, sure. So we arranged a Zoom call. And actually, the experiment that the students do, she helped me figure out what that experiment would be, and then she read the opening chapters and things for me to make sure that I did get it right. So that was great. It was great, and it worked out fine. And those are the bogus blooms, the GMOs in this book.
Love it. Did you know you were going to write a series when you wrote your first book?
Yeah, I could just see it as a series. And because I read series, like Elizabeth Peters, Amelia Peabody, that is like, to me, the gold standard, right? I read I don't know, what is it, like 23 books in that series. I loved those. And like Donna Leon's Guido Brunetti series, oh my God, I'm in love with Guido Brunetti. So yeah, I love series, and always in my head, like, I could picture, okay, this is what's going to happen, book 2, book 3. And then I right now I have ideas for 2 future Holly and Ivies, even though that's not what I'm working on at the moment.
Right, right. We're going to get to that. So do you have to keep like a series Bible to keep everything
Yeah,
straight?
yeah, pretty much. I do have the thing is, I know these characters so well that it's pretty easy for me to write these books. However, yeah, you have to keep a document where, you know, what color is the car, exactly how old are they, you know, but as far as their preferences, what they like, what they don't like, that's second nature for me. So and I have other recurring characters, but yeah, you do have to keep things straight.
Yes, and that's one thing we've heard with other authors that we've chatted with that have a series that it's a must, and I find that fascinating. I really do. I'm like, I want to write a series just to keep a Bible, but so let's talk about your first departure from a cozy mystery, because I feel like with your teaching background, you were probably quite compelled to write when you got the idea for Stop the Threat. You probably felt very compelled to make it happen and to write the story. Will you tell us about that?
Certainly. Um, I was attending the Mauldin Citizens Police Academy, and the last speaker was the school resource officer from the high school here in Mauldin. And his topic was the shooter, the active shooter. And as always, when there is a shooting, somebody asks the question, well, why don't we just arm the teachers? So, as a teacher, whenever someone says that, as a former teacher, whenever someone would say that, I think you really don't have any idea of what it's like to be in a classroom setting. You just don't. And you certainly don't understand that everybody can't be trained to be a soldier. Everybody can't do that. You know, one of the things that the school resource officer said in the classes, there are three basic responses, because I could tell when they asked him this question, he was not a big fan, because he said, look, you don't know until you're under fire yourself what your reaction will be. He goes, it's not like going to a firing range. You get training in how to use a gun. He goes, but when you're taking fire, it's a whole different experience. And there are three responses: flight, fight, or freeze. I'm a freezer. I freeze. I'm no good. I just, when something's happening quickly in front of me, I just completely freeze. But anyway, I during that very class, I thought, I started thinking of all the things that could go wrong if every teacher in a building had a gun. All right. From even where do you put that gun to what happens if the kids get a hold of the gun, to, you know, like all these different scenarios. So that is what, and even what about the teachers who, in a fit of anger, decide to use the gun to threaten students, which can be a very realistic thing. I think today, I mean, I still remember a teacher across the hall from me being bullied by students, and at any rate, I just thought, you know, there's got to be other ways to do it. And I don't think, well, in the book, I've created a fictitious town where the teachers are required to carry guns. So I took it to the extreme to show, to demonstrate what I wanted to demonstrate in the book about what it's like being in a classroom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, based on what I know of the premise of the story, I did think that there was probably a very interesting take that you would have on that. And so I am looking forward to reading that, as well as your series, of course. But so let's talk about what is happening, what's next for you, because you've alluded a couple of times that there's another something not of the norm for Sally Handley that's in the works.
Absolutely. I am having so much fun with this. A friend of mine, okay, there's a character in my series, Kate Farmer, and Kate Farmer is based on this friend of mine who has like, I think she's got a little ESP, little uh powers, right? And she frequently will like, go buy something and not know why she bought it. And then like 6 months later, she'll discover the use for what she bought. So she sends me a book for Christmas called Kindling the Celtic Spirit. Now, I am a novel reader. I don't read nonfiction. I don't read books like this, but for some reason, I thought, let me start reading this book. And when I did, I got the idea for a fantasy book that I wanted to write based on Celtic culture. And this is an amazing experience for me because, I kept reading and I thought, well, I have to do a lot of research. I had the basic premise for the book. And I'm thinking, I have to do so much research about these Celtic gods and goddesses and the druids and the fairies and the leprechauns and who does what and what their functions are. But then I got the idea for the characters and I got the idea for the first chapter. And I thought, all right, you know what? Let me sit down and write that first chapter. And I did. And then I got the idea for the second chapter. Then Sisters in Crime, I think the national organization ran this webinar called like polka dot plotting. And I thought, when I read the description for this, I thought, I'm not a plotter. I'm a pantser, by the way. I can only plot a few chapters ahead. But this polka dot plotting was all about like what happens when you have an idea for um, out of sequence, because I write definitely in sequence.
Right.
From start to finish. And once in a while, like I'll get to the end and realize, oh, I need to go back and add something somewhere along the line in another draft. But basically, I don't just come up with ideas. But with this book, I was getting ideas for scenes with goddesses and with these different characters and what the fairies might do. And I thought, how am I going to keep all this straight? And I don't know enough to do this yet. And I owned Scrivener, but it always was too difficult for me to use. But all of a sudden, I realized, so I took the polka dot plotting webinar and I thought, oh God, yes, this is it. I'm going to use Scrivener. I'm finally going to use Scrivener. There you go. I've had it for years and years. I'm finally going to use it. And I now have like, at least 10 scenes, ideas for 10 future scenes that I'm not ready to write yet. But there's something about writing, and I don't know if every writer feels this way, but there's just something about it for me that I kind of feel like once I sit down and start, something else takes over, like the characters start talking to one another, and all of a sudden, I'm on this journey they're taking me on this journey. And so many times I will not have an idea of where I'm going with a chapter, but I've started. And as soon as I start, the ideas start to come. So, it's what Stephen King says, and on writing, it's just like if you have an idea, just sit down and start. And I highly recommend that as I also remember reading an interview with Gresham, and he said, "Right, make your goal like 200 words a day." And I thought, it's pretty good because, who can't write 200 words? And he says, at the end of the year, you'll have a book. But here's the thing about it. If you sit down and write 200 words, you're not going to stop.
Right.
the ideas start flowing. And that really is the secret to writing. I mean, I've heard other writers say the same thing. It's just like, make yourself sit down and start. Because otherwise, you know, you can find everything under the sun to distract you, because most of the time you're writing from home, right? And there's always something else you could be doing. But once you sit down and you start, that's when the ideas start to flow.
Will, you mentioned Scrivener, and that was one of the things I was going to ask you if you used any type of program. Can you tell us, like, you know, hey, use your marketing skills and sell us on on Scrivener? Like, why
Well,
should we
it's not easy,
invest in
but
that?
they've got, when I first purchased it, they didn't have as many online webinars to help you and with the different pieces of it. But basically, you can use it. I still type my stuff in Microsoft Word and then bring it into Scrivener, because that way it's easier to move things around. But for example, with you can write a little summary of what the chapter is, which is very important, because if you get to, like, I'm on chapter 25 now, and I may have forgotten what somebody said in chapter 4. Or was it chapter 4? Was it chapter 2? Was it? Because I'm not naming these chapters. I'm just letting them be numbered. And that's why. So when you're looking at it, there's a view where you've got your list of chapters, and then below it, you can have a list of scenes by word, by, word description. You can have your document in the center, and over on this side, you can have the summaries. So you can easily slide down and find which chapter you're looking for. So that's what I'm using right now, and it's working. Now, you also can have your research over here, like you've got a bar, and you can have research files. So for example, if I research a location in Ireland, like Ballyknoe, I can put in the website URL, and anytime I want to go back and look at it again, it's right there. It's all there. So it's not at first blush, it's challenging, just like anything else. There's a learning curve to getting better at it, but you can use it quite simply. I know they can export it and all, but basically I'm using Kindle Create is what they've now got to format your document. So I'm not going to be using well, we'll see when I get to the end. Because I'm pretty good at figuring things out eventually. But it takes time. But this is working for me for this book, which is very different from anything else I've done before.
Do you have a title for it yet?
Yes, The Harp of the Woods.
Oh.
And it came from a quote, because again, this has like a little environmental theme. And there was this little bit of poetry about, like, and the harp of the woods will be heard again once more.
Okay.
And yeah, it's an environmental, because the thing about the Celts and the Druids, they had a deep connection to the natural world, which to me we lack today, which is why we abuse the environment. And so there you have what's going on in this book.
Well, it sounds fascinating. I'm looking forward to reading that as well. So, believe it or not, we have made it to we have filled the hour with this
Wow.
conversation, and it definitely went by quickly for me. And you're fascinating to chat with, and I would love to keep in touch with you.
Please do.
And so just to kind of wrap it up, do you have a favorite author in our genre that you like to read regularly?
Well, as I said before, there's Elizabeth Peters, and I actually prepared for this question when I read looked at some of the other off-the-shelf entries. Donna Leon, definitely. Elizabeth Peters, absolutely. Now, The book that I have read most recently that I absolutely love, which was a mystery, is Holly by Stephen King.
Yes.
Oh my God. He is just like, I just, we are not worthy. I mean, he is such a magnificent storyteller and he has such a voice. And I never read his really scary stuff, his earlier stuff, but the stuff like the Mr. Mercedes, which is where Holly comes from. This book, I loved it. And, talk about the rules that people tell you not to break, like too much backstory. Holly is so much backstory about Holly, and you are with that story every step of the way. So that has been my favorite, most recent book. And in my mystery book club, we are reading 9/10 of the Law by Claudia Hagedis Long, which is a really interesting book about retrieving a menorah. Two sisters tried to retrieve a menorah that belonged to their family that they have seen in a museum display, but all of a sudden it disappears. And then, it's quite a good book, a lot in there.
And you said that the menorah was in their family originally?
Yes,
So was this
yes,
part of the World War
yes,
II? Yeah, I'm
taken by the
fascinated with that
Nazis.
stuff, by the way.
Yeah, yeah,
I've collected a few books on that topic, a nonfiction and fiction, because I've become really interested in that whole.
yeah. It's fascinating, and I learned a lot about their mother was a Holocaust victim, so so much of the psyche and the inherited fears and feelings that are passed down from generation to generation. It's a really well written, well done book.
Well, thank you for sharing that as well. My to be read list has grown. Okay, so let's just check the comments really quick. It was Deb Richardson Moore's question about Scribner, and then Annis, who has joined us. She said she really enjoyed hearing about your life and work, as did Deborah Mitchell. Deborah Mitchell is a new author, and she had a marketing career as well. Prior to becoming a veterinarian. So everybody, thank you so much. I enjoyed this. We did record this session, so we will be able to post it on the Sisters in Crime Atlanta website, as well as our YouTube channel. So you'll be able to catch it and rewatch it there. And also Sally will be able to share it through her networks. And so there'll be an opportunity for us to revisit this conversation, which I really enjoyed.
Me too. Me too. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. And I'll go ahead and put in a plug for our April author for Off the Shelf. That will be on April 20th, I believe. And it's with Karen Dion. And I'm really excited to have her. She has written 2 books, and one of those books was made into a movie. So I think it'll be a great conversation. So Lance, I'm going to kick it back to you to send us off.
Okay, thanks, Dawn, and thanks very much, Sally. A wonderful program and very exciting writing career there.
Thank you.
Just to remind everyone, coming up next Saturday is Reader Rendezvous. That's where readers come together on Zoom at 10 o'clock to talk about what they've read lately and why they liked it. And that's hosted by Edie Peterson and Charlie Brooks, who in my screen is in the upper right-hand corner. Following that, on the second Saturday, which will be the 13th, is our regular chapter meeting, and that features our member author showcase. And in this case, we'll have 7 authors in the chapter discussing what they have written and what's their most recent book, and they'll be available for sale through the chapter at that meeting. But also, backing up till next weekend, it's the Carrollton Book Fest, and that's on Friday the 5th and Saturday the 6th, where we'll have chapter members giving workshops on Friday. Liz Lazarus and Sharon Marcasello will be discussing thrillers at 9 o'clock. And that's at the Carrollton Arts Center. And Tanisha Curtis will be discussing editing in an afternoon workshop at 1:30. Then on Saturday, we'll have a cozy workshop panel, and that will include Kathy Tully, also known as Liz, S.C. Merritt, Kathy Manos Penn, and I'm going to miss this last one. Somebody help me.
Susan Kiernan,
Susan Kiernan Lewis. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, and we'll have book sales available there as well. Then on the 27th of April, that's Independent Bookstore Day, and the chapter will have authors at 4 different bookstores, starting in the South, Story on the Square in McDonough, Tall Tales Bookshop in Toco Hills, the Book Exchange in Marietta, and the Crazy Lady Bookstore in Ackworth. So your calendar for April can be very full of chapter-related events. And we appreciate, Sally, once again, your appearing here. And we look forward to seeing all of you again real soon.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Sally.
I love